Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome into Sports Talk Chicago, right here on WLS AM 890. I am Joey Christopoulos. Thank you so much for coming on in. I hope you're enjoying your Saturday afternoon. We got a great guest coming up in just a second. Quick programming note, if you will. You're listening to us right now on Saturday afternoon. Typically, we air at 8 to 9 p.m. every single Saturday. But this week and next week, we're going to be from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So if you like what you're hearing right now, come on back on your Saturday drive next week. I'm going to bring in my guest here right now. He's a man. He's a legend. He's a returning guest here to Sports Talk Chicago. You might have seen him on NBC Sports Chicago. That's going away, but he is not going anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. He's here to talk some Bears. He's here to talk some Cubs. It's Brendan Sugrue. What's up, Brendan?
Joey, it is so good to talk with you again, my friend. How are you? How are you as we get ready for football season? I'm so excited. How are you feeling?
So that's a great question because I feel like as a Bears fan, this Bears hibernation has felt like 350 years. Since the day after the Bears' great civil war of Justin Fields versus Caleb Williams, and Justin Fields was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I feel like this offseason has been almost on borderline perfection, Brendan, but it's taken forever, and we still have 1 week to go. My Bears spirit is ready to crawl out of my skin. How do you feel about this Bears offseason? Are you ready to roll? And is it's taking as long as I feel like that it's taken this offseason?
I'm so ready to roll. It's been such a weird offseason. You're right. I mean, you think back to January with the Justin Fields rumors, the Caleb Williams rumors, the Matt Eberflus rumors. Matt Eberflus was almost fired like the day after the season. And we've come so far from then. He has a glow up. The Bears have done so much in free agency and the draft. You kind of look back and you forget how much has actually happened this offseason. And slowly but surely the hype has built up and you started to see practices. We've started to see preseason games, and it really feels like that the hype is ready to burst. Everybody's ready for week one. I'm certainly ready for week one. I'm very excited for what this Bears team can do. And we're just literally a week away now, just about, from the Bears and Titans kicking off and getting the season underway. There is not a better, no matter what kind of Bears team there is, Joey, there is never a better time of year than right now.
Hope is definitely springing eternal right now. We are going to get into a Bears season preview here in just a second, but you're 100% right. There's no Byron Pringle doing donuts in a parking lot. There's no rumors that the draft pick Kevin White might have a fractured leg and may have to have a season-ending surgery. There's none of this off-season agita, if you will. So I want to get to Hard Knocks, then the season preview. But first, I just want to get your take on the preseason. There was a great tweet out there recently that statistically, a team that finishes the preseason undefeated with a point differential over 60 points. There's been 6 teams that have done that over the last 10 years. All 6 have made the playoffs. 2 of them have gone to the Super Bowl. When you hear that, how do you make sense of that? And how much should Bears fans buy into that?
Yeah, I think CBS Sports put that out. Shout out to them. That was wild. I knew the Bears were having a great preseason, but to have the point differential and just to beat down opponents as much as they did really surprised me. Look, I'll take some credence in what is happening with that because I think it does show that the Bears are a well-coached team. There were very few penalties. They have a lot of depth, and I think you could see that on the field. Not only with what Ryan Poles has said this week about saying this is the deepest team that he's ever seen, but the fact that you've seen just the third stringers and the fourth stringers continuing to make plays. And I do think it does say something about having a fast start. So you go back to 2022, and because a lot of people have looked back to that preseason just 2 years ago where the Bears went 3-0, and they performed very, very well then too. Obviously, the 2022 season wasn't a good one, but the Bears still won their week 1 game, and they went 2-1 to start the season. So I do think some of that momentum did carry over to start the year. Now, of course, the wheels fell off, but then back in 1994, which is the last time the Bears went 4-0, they won their week 1 game too. So the NFL season is going to change a ton from September 8th all the way through December 31st, January 5th, whatever the last week 18 is. But I think there is something to be said about starting fast and having that momentum carry over to week 1. So I think it's good news for the start of the season. We'll see if it continues and the Bears can build on that momentum and adjust as the year goes on. But yeah, you can't be mad about it. How can you be mad about the Bears winning preseason games? Maybe it doesn't mean anything there, but it's nice to see wins, and it's nice to see decisive wins at the same time.
Brendan, you're putting it so perfectly. It doesn't matter, but it's better than the alternative. Right?
Yes.
It's better than the opposite, which leads to the transition into Hard Knocks. I want to get your take on Hard Knocks because, look, we live in a society, especially on social media, where everyone gets to voice their opinion, which means that criticism can rain down from any angle on basically almost anything these days. So there have been a lot of criticisms about Hard Knocks, adjectives that I don't personally share in, but I'm going to share with the audience. Some people think that it's boring. Some people have been upset that it has been sanitized due to the language. Other people maybe are wishing and hoping to see things that I'm not exactly sure what they're hoping and wishing to see. I want to get your take on Hard Knocks right now because we could at least start here, Brendan, that if Hard Knocks was being taped right now and they were 0-4 in this preseason, I'll take what we're getting. I'll take boring old Hard Knocks right now than that alternative.
I would too. Oh my goodness. I actually was thinking about this early on in training camp before the series came out. Caleb Williams had some really rough practices, and I just kept thinking, oh man, this is going to be on Hard Knocks, and we're going to hear about it from a ton of other NFL fans and national media types. And you did kind of see that early on. They had the montage of Caleb Williams just misfiring pass after pass right after they gave him the Michael Jordan treatment, of course. So that was just perfect timing by them. But you're right. Like it is nice to see the wins actually happen. The feel-good stories of the preseason. Of course, the last episode with Ian Wheeler was just such a heartbreaker. But look, I think some of the criticisms are valid in that this definitely feels like a very edited Hard Knocks, not just because of the language, which George McCaskey did say he wants children and kids and families to be able to watch this. And you know what? I kind of don't hate that. Like, Hard Knocks is supposed to be unfiltered and it's a different look, with HBO, but I don't mind that people are able to watch with their kids and not have to worry about things or, being said or things happening. But that being said, I was a little confused why some of the fights were missing. There were some big fights that happened at training camp. The Jalen Johnson press conference where he said it's BS that that he wasn't voted to the NFL top 100. They just completely cut that out. They didn't even use like a beep or anything. And I think that sort of makes it a little bit disingenuous because it changes his answer a little bit. So I think while it's fine for the most part to have a little bit watered down Hard Knocks, you're missing some of the meat that's in there for training camp. But at the same time, this is kind of where Hard Knocks has been going the last few years, at least the training camp version. And I think, I don't know about you, as an NFL fan overall, after about the third episode, usually for other teams, I'm kind of tuning out because real football's starting. So I'm not surprised that other people are like, you know what, yeah, I'm kind of over this. Like, let's just get to the regular season. For people who cover the Bears and watch the Bears, it's a totally different story. But I also just think this is where Hard Knocks is going. And the last point I'll make real quickly, I'm sure the Bears saw what the Giants went through with the offseason edition and how much exposure, good or bad, that Joe Shane was getting. And they said, we do not want that because we don't want to be looking incompetent at all. So I'm sure that played into it.
HBO sits down and they go, okay, Bears, let's just go through a list of some things that might concern you. And then they just hit a button and the Giants offseason comes on and they go, none of this. None of that right there. You made a really great point, Brendan. And look, I think this isn't going to matter to fans and listeners, but I think this is something that they might need to understand to wrap their head around what we're seeing on Hard Knocks now with the Chicago Bears and probably moving forward, is that you made a great point that I think they want to do not just the offseason, not just the preseason, but now they're going to do the in-season, which we're going to see with the AFC North. I will say that the test will be that AFC North with Mike Tomlin and the Baltimore Ravens some of the guys in the Cincinnati Bengals defense and Myles Garrett. If that's cleaned up and that's sanitized, that is a clear message that this is where Hard Knocks is moving towards in the future to try and get a larger demographic. I'm with you. I could do with or without the swears. I was talking to our producer, John Meadows, before this show. Long gone are the days where Rex Ryan is leaning in a Barker lounger, cursing out a player watching film while he's pounding M&Ms at a table. You know what I mean? It's evolved. It's a different way that we see the NFL and probably how it operates behind closed doors. So I'm with you on that aspect. Yeah, it's been a little strange. We haven't gotten any Montez Sweat. Other than maybe a couple things that he said from maybe about 20 or 25 feet away, which is curious, and maybe that lends me to maybe think that maybe he has a little bit more of a profanity-laced way of communicating on the field because he seems to be the leader in the trenches there in general. But look, it's tough, right? I mean, I think you want to put together a good product and you want the McCaskies to be on board. I'm just wondering from a production standpoint, Brendan, these are the types of things that Hard Knocks is trying to do to get more people to say yes, because every year isn't half the storyline with Hard Knocks the people that are saying no as much as it is the one team that says yes.
Absolutely. I mean, and it also depends on the criteria as well. Like they can force teams to do it, but they have to meet the criteria. And this year it was just 3 teams that actually met the criteria to be quote unquote forced to do Hard Knocks. So yeah, you want to make it a little more appealing. I do think it's good to hear that players like Cole Kmet and the coaches have said Hard Knocks really isn't much of a distraction. Like they get things, but we really don't notice them. And that's good to hear, because I know that a lot of fans were concerned that this is going to be too much. People don't want to see it. The only distraction I think that's actually happening is when the players talk about the previous episode, about getting texts and getting, messages about what happened, like the Velus Jones ferret story, for example, and then the Theo Benedict with the Canadian Eagle talking about that and how women were coming after him. So that's really the only distraction, which I think is pretty funny, and they can laugh about it and then go back to work. You did mention something I want to get your opinion on. Yeah. A few players I thought we were going to see a lot more of, and we haven't. You mentioned Montez Sweat. I'm kind of shocked we haven't seen any Tevin Jenkins for how much of a personality that he has. What about you?
I've been surprised that, so if you want to get into it from a Bears perspective, and we'll be talking about it towards the end of this segment and in segment 2 here on Sports Talk Chicago, WLS AM 890 on Saturdays, is that I think the 2 big areas that the Chicago Bears have a microscope on, or the things that maybe we might have a concern about, are the defensive line and the offensive line. And outside of, you, as you said, a rookie like Theo Benedict doing a wonderful karaoke version of Proud to Be an American, or buying the wrong wet wipes at a local store, we have not learned a single thing about any of these guys. And look, you might say to yourself 2 things. One, I think it is very fair to say that the Chicago Bears, and Bears fans, you might want to sit down for this, we have a lot of personalities and a lot of great storylines heading into this season. It's hard to pack them all in. One of the executive producers was on a show recently, and she said this was the first time ever that we decided to feature a punter on Hard Knocks. So it's not like that they're wanting for stories. So maybe one of the ways I can rationalize it is that they're pushing them aside just because they're trying to focus on a lot of different stuff. They are spending a lot of time on Caleb Williams, which is very fair and very justified from a production standpoint. But, man, you're right, man. I would love to hear the story of Braxton Jones, a guy who obviously was a late-round draft pick of Ryan Poles, was thrust into the starter's role, dealt with an injury last year, and now this year is really the year for him to either solidify himself as the left tackle of the future, or maybe he's going to turn into a swing guy, or who knows with his career. Tevin Jenkins is another great one, playing for a contract. Darnell Wright, a rookie last year, coming into his second year, had a couple struggles through training camp so far. And then on the other side of the football, Montez Sweat, and obviously you got Javon Dexter and others. But, man, there are storylines to tell there. But, man, it is really interesting. And as a Bears fan, that's a great thing to point out, because, am I wrong that those 2 areas, the offensive line and the defensive line, are probably what we're going to be hopefully not complaining about in October? You know what I mean? Like, those are 2 areas of definite interest for Bears fans.
Right. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of questions. I mean, you mentioned Tevin Jenkins, Braxton Jones. How about Nate Davis? Like the whole Nate Davis thing, not practicing, having to answer questions about it. Like Leaf Schreiber could have easily said, one player in particular who hasn't been out there is Nate Davis. And, just like even
another player who likes to take a day off besides Ferris Bueller is Nate Davis.
Yes. Oh, that's good. That's good. We got to get you writing for HBO, man. Oh my goodness. But for real, he was somebody being talked about quite a bit. Wasn't really sure what his job situation was going to be. There was a center competition early on. Now that's been essentially settled because of partly due to injury to Ryan Bates, but that was still a big talking point. Gervon Dexter completely changed his body, and he's considered one of the potential breakout players on the defensive line. Haven't heard much of him. So for not only the personalities, but the question marks, and I think things that people are interested in, there is a lot to go over. There's a lot with 90 players, as well as coaches, as well as GMs, and it's hard to fit it all in. But I guess I expected just a little bit more, especially with the trenches, like you said.
Yeah, we're going to get to one more thing here before we take a break. Let's get into a little bit of some Caleb Williams talk. Let's just kind of focus solely on Hard Knocks right now, and then we'll roll it forward in segment 2 on what you think from him in the season coming up. I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from Caleb Williams is two things, and I want to get your take on both of them and what your impressions have been as well. The first one is, my take on Caleb Williams is that he's a 21-year-old football nerd. When they ask him, I mean, we've tried to ask him on several different occasions about what his hobbies are or interests outside of football. I think he said on ESPN last week that he enjoys normal human activities, which is one way to answer it. And he's mentioned that he enjoys playing cards and, hanging out with friends and all that good stuff. So maybe he's playing it close to the vest. But you can kind of see, Brendan, I'm glomming that during practice, that you could see Tyson Bagent has a bit of a personality that I can understand maybe lives outside of the game of football, and you could have a conversation or a dinner with him. Caleb Williams, to me, feels like he is dialed in on football every step of the way, and it seems like when he gets excited is like when someone throws a dime or when someone makes a great play, and not much else really gets him going. The other aspect of this, which I think is really important, Brendan, is we just spent all off season and before the draft debating the merits and the realness or the falsehoods of Caleb Williams' personality. And I think when you bring in a crew like Hard Knocks, I think that easily could have brought a couple of things maybe up to the surface that we would have had a comments about. I haven't seen anything like that from Caleb Williams. So I want to get your thoughts on Caleb Williams, but more specifically, him and his personality. And I think just going back and maybe kicking the dead horse one more time, that a lot of those narratives continue to be proved false.
It's amazing how much. No, seriously, it's just the amount of hate and just disrespect that this young man has had thrown his way ever since the last college football season. I mean, I still have a tweet saved of him crying, in his mom's lap basically after a loss. And there's quite a few Chicago Bears accounts saying, I don't want this type of player as my Bears quarterback. And I distinctly said, I love a guy who shows his emotion. Like, everybody complained about Jay Cutler not caring, and now you're talking about Caleb Williams caring too much. Like, which one is it?
Bravo. Yes.
There's no pleasing a certain group of fans. So his personality, I think he's been the same kind of guy. I think early on in the offseason, you can see the different interests he's had. He's been golfing. He's gone out to baseball games. He's hung out with teammates. He's been doing charity work. You could see, actually, he was enjoying himself as he's getting acclimated to a new lifestyle in Chicago and getting to know his teammates, getting to know the city. But that has kind of gone away now with training camp going, and it shows like he has those interests, he has those hobbies, but now that it's football time, like, he is dialed in. You're 100% right about that. I loved a recent interview he did And by the way, he's done a lot of media. I give him a lot of credit because that is not easy. I don't think it's easy for anybody, but especially for a rookie to do as many media interviews as he's done. I don't want to overlook that because that's a lot being asked of him outside of his job. But look, he was asked in one of his most recent ones, you're always smiling out there. Like you're having an authentically good time. And he said, yeah, I'm having fun. Like I love being a part of this team. I love playing ball. I love this organization. Like he's in a good spot. You can just, it feels so genuine with him that he truly is just enjoying himself and loves what he's doing. And you can see the growth. And I think he said something very interesting early on for his introductory press conference. He said to reporters, I'm doing a lot more listening than talking right now because I need to get acclimated with this team. I think you've started to see that shift over the last few weeks where he's doing a lot more talking. He's getting involved with players and coaches, and it all is so great. So I hope that the narrative is officially dead. I know it's going to come back because as soon as he has a bad game, as soon as he shows some bad body language, the body language police are going to come out. That already has happened a little bit with Hard Knocks. But I'm so impressed with him as not only a quarterback, but as somebody who is just coming out of school and has all of these expectations. And so far, he is handling them with just so much ease.
And conversely, think about this, Bears fans. As you mentioned, typically when athletes have that, they don't even need to be extroverted, but athletes that sometimes tend to smile and enjoy the game and just try and live their life and live in the present moment and then also have success, those are also, Brendan, athletes that we typically all try and tear down as quickly as possible, right? The ones that seem to be winning and enjoying it are also the ones that seems like fan bases go after too as well. So my hope is that when that does happen, that Bears fans everywhere kind of bond together and we can form a shield around that because that's our quarterback, that's our guy. But that happens in sports too, Brendan, that, you know, even when things go wrong, we criticize, maybe some people bail or jump off the bandwagon, but also a young player who has success early in his career and is smiling and having a good time, there's a lot of people that want to tear that down too.
You're right. I mean, especially if things aren't going maybe like 100% well, like, you know, oh, this is a tight game. Why are you smiling or something like that?
Yeah. Why is he laughing when we're down by 3 in the third quarter? There 1,000% will be people that will criticize him for that because, I mean, that's why, you know, we just can't have nice things. I mean, maybe my final thought, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we'll probably, maybe if you want to dive into it on the back end, but I always just think about this stuff too is, look, I grew up enjoying heavy metal music, okay? I loved punk rock music. And I'm sure like a lot of different music genres out there, when I was in my late 90s, I was a music snob. And you know what? If I heard a song that didn't exactly sound like the guitar tone or whatever it was that I was accustomed to listening to or I thought was cool, I would criticize it, right? And I would be a real snob about it. And I feel like sometimes we get into these same sports echo chambers a little bit when we had the Caleb Williams versus Justin Fields. And the fact that maybe Justin Fields isn't even on the team anymore, we want to go back and we want to wag a finger at those that rooted after them. It almost feels like those same kind of music fights that we would have like back in the 90s. So I don't think that this is new to the human race of us going back and forth with these types of criticisms. I'm just saying that you want to just sort of try to take everything as it comes. And we got to just try and enjoy the ride because guess what? The ride is only 1 week away, Bears fans. And hopefully this ride is going to be long and successful and amazing for Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. We got to take a quick break here on Sports Talk Chicago. You are listening to WLS AM 890. I am Joey Christopoulos with my guest, Brendan Sugrue. We are coming right back with more Bears talk and maybe just a little Cubs talk. We'll be back. Coming back here on Sports Talk Chicago, I am Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. Thank you so much for tuning in here on a Saturday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Programming note, just keep in mind, Sports Talk Chicago typically airs every Saturday night from 8 to 9 p.m. But as you are listening to us in the afternoon, we will also be on next week too as well, September 7th from 2 to 3 o'clock. So make sure you tune in and thank you for supporting. We have the wonderful Bears Wire's Brendan Sugrue here on the show with us. We're moving on here. And guys, we've been talking about what ifs, and candies and nuts and ifs and buts. But ladies and gentlemen, it is time to finally do a little bit of a Chicago Bears season preview. So what better to have Brendan on here? We're going to kick it off like this. I'm going to do X factors here, one player from each side of the ball that we think is going to have to make a difference this year to make this team a playoff team or a double-digit win team. Brendan, let's start on the offensive side of the ball first. Give us your X factor for the Chicago Bears in 2024.
This was such an interesting exercise to think about because X factor can mean a ton of different things. And I'll be interested to see your thoughts and if we agree or if we go in a different direction. My X factor for the offense is running back DeAndre Swift. So the Bears signed DeAndre Swift to a pretty lucrative contract in free agency away from the Philadelphia Eagles. It is actually the first time I'd say the Bears truly invested in a running back since they paid Matt Forte 10 plus years ago, which I think goes to show not only where the position has gone, but also where the position was for the Bears the last 2 years, considering Justin Fields was their rushing offense. So my question with DeAndre Swift, is he truly a featured back at this point in his career who can beat you both as a rusher and a receiver? Or was last year kind of an outlier on a really good offense with a really good offensive line and a quarterback who could really run the ball and punch it into the end zone in Jalen Hurts? So DeAndre Swift had over 1,000 yards. He had 1,449 yards in 16 games, 5 rushing touchdowns. Could have been more considering the tush push probably robbed him of at least a couple. But he only had 214 receiving yards on 39 catches. However, he's a very good pass catching running back. He was 4th among running backs in receptions and receiving yards since he was drafted in 2020 with 195 and 1,412 in that time frame. So he can beat you both ways. And I think for a rookie quarterback and an offense that, while they're stacked at wide receiver, getting the ground game going for a guy like Caleb Williams is so paramount to having success, not only for him, but the overall offense. But can he be that same running back? He averaged 2.8 yards per before contact last year, which was 4th among running backs, but that's also behind a really good Eagles offensive line. So was that more of a product of the Eagles line or him? So I think he could be still very good. He's a young running back. He could just be now hitting his prime after some rough seasons with Detroit. If he gets off to a fast start and the Bears can utilize him and rely on him for both running and catching the ball, this offense is going places because now you have to account for a pass catching running back who the Bears really haven't had since 2020 in Tariq Cohen. That element has been completely missing from their offense. So I'm very interested to see what he can do. I think if he gets going, the offense is going to have a much better shot of having success.
This is why I like having you on. This is why I consider you a friend, because I had the same pick.
Oh, boy.
Because I'm going to pick somebody else, but I just want to follow up with some of my thoughts because you're 100% correct. We've talked a lot about the wide receivers in the offseason. We've talked a lot about the quarterback in the offseason. It has been strangely one of those years where I feel like the Chicago Bears aren't pointing to the bus, telling us to get on it, and then explaining to us why we run off of it. We run the ball getting off of that bus every single year. It is going to be a component that is going to have to be successful for the Chicago Bears this year. We all remember DeAndre Swift, or I used to call him DeAndre Sift Hands, if you will, dad joke, for dropping that pass on that wheel route during the Mitch Trubisky Bears era a couple years ago. And he's dealt with some injuries here and there. I'm with you. He had a great season last year. Can he be a great component from the backfield? Absolutely. My biggest question is, Brendan, game scenario for you, which is I love to do. I love to do stuff like this. It's 20-14 Bears. It's the 4th quarter with about 8 minutes to go, and it's maybe about 30-ish degrees in November. And the Chicago Bears, it would behoove them to try and get 2, 3, 4 minutes off the clock. Who are they handing the ball off to in that scenario? I mean, who is going to be the Iceman? Is it going to be DeAndre Swift between the tackles, taking it over and over again? I'm not saying I want a David Montgomery clone out there. Can it be Roshan Johnson, or can it be somebody like DeAndre Swift? And if it isn't, ground and pound running guys over, can they mix and match and keep it in his hands and play a little bit of that time possession, which you're going to have to do in the NFL, especially when you've got a coach that blew multiple 4th quarter leads last year, a team that still is trying to honestly learn how to win, and a quarterback that's going to be a rookie trying to seal down W's. So, I'm with you, man, on DeAndre Swift. He's going to look great. I think there's going to be some huge plays. I think in that flat passing game, maybe in that wheel route game, hopefully a little bit in the screen game. But yeah, once he gets the ball into his hands, is he going to be able to make guys miss, and is he going to be able to move the chains enough? Because isn't that the other thing, Brendan, is you want a running back that's at least going to take some of the pressure off of Caleb, so we don't have to feel like we have to rack up 35, 38-plus pass attempts on him every single game?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that the Bears recognize that in free agency to just say, look, instead of trying to find a Band-Aid or maybe seeing what the Bears have in Roschon Johnson and trying Khalil Herbert again, both of them, I think, capable running backs and both offer different skill sets that can be useful. But DeAndre Swift has shown he can do both. For a small kind of guy, he's like 5'10", 215. He can go through between the tackles. He can also hit you outside. You do have the threat of the pass. So if he is in that situation, I'll go back to the game scenario, Joey. If you're down by, or if you're up by a touchdown and you're trying to bleed some clock, you can use a heavy dose of DeAndre Swift as well as Roschon Johnson because you truly don't know where the ball's going in that situation. You can rely on play action. You can rely on dump offs with both of them. Roschon is a capable third down blocker when it comes to pass blocking. So I would kind of rely on both of those guys and really use DeAndre Swift heavy early on to throw different looks at the offense and try to get things moving as quickly as possible. But yeah, I think we have a misconception about him that he's always just a pass catching running back. He can't really run between the tackles. He was actually pretty effective last year between the tackles, but that also goes to show how good Philly's offensive line is. Can the Bears do the same thing? That's a big question mark. But I still think there's a lot of potential with him in this offense, and I'm hoping that he builds on his success that he had in Philadelphia here in Chicago now.
Yeah, it's a great call. I'm 100% on board with you. I'll go with my X factor here. Can I go with like a Y factor, which is like a smaller factor of when you do mention offensive line? I do want to throw out Coleman Shelton just like really quickly.
Good call.
Just because of not only did the issues that we had last year, where Brendan and I brought it up a couple times on this show, but man, we had problems snapping the football, which typically, that starts in the backyard. And when we talk about the things that we want to criticize for Justin Fields and the excuses that some people want to make for him, the one excuse that I would give to Justin Fields is it is hard when you don't know where the snap is coming from and your eyes are already moving at snap because you have to locate the football, whether it's up, left, right, or wherever that is. I think that's one of those little idiosyncratic things that can kind of hurt a quarterback at times, and our center play wasn't good enough last year. And honestly, our center play hasn't been good for several years now running back to the Sam Mustafers of the world. So Coleman Shelton, with that rookie quarterback, that exchange, you talk a lot about pre-snap. A center can obviously diagnose and kind of communicate to a rookie quarterback what he sees and what they want to do if they want to slide protection. I think that can be an interesting wrinkle there, that if he can solidify that position just for this year with Caleb Williams, I think it will give us a leg up that won't be seen in the box score, but hopefully results in wins and losses. My X factor, let's have some more fun here on the show. How is it not Rome Odunze, right? So here's what I'll say about it, right? We all think Rome Odunze is good. We all think, look, number 9 pick. We get it. I watched him in the national championship game last year. I see the talent. But I think the X factor, I want to talk about it like this, where the Chicago Bears could have a good offense this year with a great trio of Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore. But Brendan, I offer this to you. What if somewhere midway through the season, Rome Odunze starts to really explode? And I mean, starts putting up numbers that are 8 catches for 120 yards. Maybe not on a week-to-week basis, but what if he truly ascends to that wide receiver 1 that we think is going to happen in 2 years? What if it happens this year with DJ Moore? I'm not saying this is an X factor that if it doesn't happen, the Chicago Bears are going to struggle. I'm saying that this is an X factor that if Rome Odunze is as advertised and the chemistry with him and Caleb flourishes, all of a sudden I think the ceiling is the roof for the Chicago Bears this year, and I think it honestly could ratchet it up to another notch if he gets to that point somehow this season.
He very well could, and I'm glad you brought this up. I actually was having a very similar conversation with a good friend, Adam Rank. He does the Sick podcast, and he was also talking about how high he was on Rome Odunze. And I had said I changed my expectations as soon as Odunze was drafted was that, okay, great. He can learn kind of behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and maybe doesn't have to be relied upon until later in the year as he gets his bearings. But then you see him up close and then you see him play and you remember how refined his route tree is, how big he is, how fast he is, how just the character too of how unselfish he can be, but how still effective he can be when going after the ball. And as well as with end arounds too, he can be a threat out of the of jet sweeps potentially. And you start to think, well, he can make much more of an impact a lot earlier. If he's developing that chemistry with Caleb Williams, and we've seen already in small doses, but those two against the Bengals, the deep pass, the touchdown that should have been in the back corner of the end zone, which was spectacular. Dunze's got to keep his feet in bounds, but he'll learn from that.
Hey, wait, real quick, Soldier Field also needs to paint the back of the end zone too as well. Can I play a little halvesies on that?
Absolutely. You can, and I was thinking the same thing. There was two different lines. It's tough to see. Rome Odunze is vindicated to some extent there. But look, we are past the days of waiting for wide receivers to hit their stride in year 3. Remember back in the day, everybody would say that, you can't judge a wide receiver for the first couple years or so. We're in an era now that Jamar Chase can quickly become wide receiver 1, where Justin Jefferson is setting records. And Rome Odunze has the ability and has the makeup to become a true wide receiver 1 in this league, and he's now developing chemistry at the same time with a rookie quarterback like Caleb Williams. So, this isn't the best comp at all, and I'm not even saying it's right, but I go back to Andy Dalton and AJ Green. Both of those guys came in early on, and they were spectacular in their rookie years. And I know Andy Dalton was just kind of an okay quarterback, but you look at what those two were able to do right out of the gate, and great things were able to happen. So I don't think you're wrong for saying Odunze can be that X factor in the middle of the season and potentially earlier, because he does have the makeup. I know, last thing I'll say quickly, I want to shout out Jacob Infante, who does great work for Windy City Gridiron. He's a draft analyst for them. He recently came out and said, since he started tracking wide receivers and analyzing them coming out of the draft, Odunze would have been the top pick in most of the years, 2017, 2018, 2019, so many times. It just so happens that he was playing with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors this year, and the Bears were fortunately able to land him at number 9.
That's a great call. I love Jacob's work for sure. And look, if you think about it from an opposing defense side, there's always going to be a focal point of who do we need to stop on a week-to-week basis. And I think it's very fair to say week 1, it's probably going to be DJ Moore. So that opens up different areas for guys like Keenan Allen and guys like Rome Odunze. Maybe Keenan Allen with the veteran presence gets some of that early shine or can take advantage of some of those matchups. But I think Rome Odunze isn't necessarily going to have the flashlight or the focus shined on him by opposing defenses right out of the gate. So he will have an opportunity to make plays, build some confidence, get that chemistry. And then finally, when you talk about that innate ability that everyone seems to have their jaws dropping over, which is Caleb's ability outside of the pocket, I would garner to say that maybe Rome Odunze is our best scramble player already on this team. We'll see with Keenan. I'm sure Keenan's very smart. I'm sure DJ can figure it out, but it seems like Rome has that ability and those young legs to already figure it out and make it happen. And my last offense of Rome Odunze stepping on that line, if you go to Universal Studios, if you go to Disney, or if you go to any amusement park, they literally pay people $18 an hour to scream at thousands of us all day long to stay behind that yellow line when the bus or the tram comes along. So honestly, if we're going to get on him, just know that there are millions others out there that can't do it at the same time. I'm just trying to provide some perspective here. And also because I thought that play was absolutely amazing. And I think it was maybe the best of those 3 or 4 athletic plays that Caleb had, the one that turned out to be incomplete. Brendan Sugrue, we're going to move on over to the defense now. Give us your X factor. I'm dying to hear this one. Your X factor for the Chicago Bears defense in 2024.
This was tougher to actually think of. I had one initial guess or one initial thought, and then I started a waffle because I think there's another good answer. But I'm going to stick with my first inkling and say my X factor on defense is cornerback Kyler Gordon. I am extremely high on this kid. He's entering his third season as the nickel corner. He improved drastically from year one to year two, and he's somebody who can be all over the field. I mean, he has the Spider-Man nickname for a reason. He has that spidey sense at the line of scrimmage to sniff out screens and sniff out play action and, be a weapon to go after the quarterback. We saw that in the preseason the last 2 years. And also with his pass coverage, he's improved as well. So last year, his opposing passer rating dropped from 101.9 in his rookie year to 93.9 last year. That's a pretty sizable drop off. Mm-hmm. He allowed 300 fewer yards in 2023 compared to his rookie season and allowed just 183 air yards compared to 418 his rookie year. So he was getting targeted a little bit less, but he's giving up fewer completions, and he's also not getting beat deep. He's keeping everything in front of him, which I think is so important. He's gotten a lot better at that. And per PFF via NBC Sports Chicago, his 83.6 passer rating from the slot was fourth among slot corners. So he is kind of on that precipice of becoming an elite nickel cornerback with what he can do in pass defense, but also run defense and go after the line of scrimmage. I think we've seen it back during the Bengals game. He stalled out drives on his own with some of those nickel blitzes and with some of those tackles for losses. He's able to do that in the regular season too, and he has done that. The biggest thing is staying healthy. He missed a lot of time early on with a broken hand last year, which I think kind of disrupted his flow. He didn't really hit his rhythm until halfway through the season. He dealt with injuries his rookie year too, right when he was kind of hitting his stride as well. So if he can stay healthy, Kyler Gordon is a Pro Bowl player. I truly believe that, and I think he just brings so many different attributes to this defense, and he can do things in pass coverage. Like I said, he could be all over the field. He is truly Spider-Man for the Bears. I'm so excited for what he can do this year.
Those are great stats and fantastic insight there about Kyler Gordon. And look, I think it is probably so what we were sold when Matt Eberflus came on was that Matt Eberflus likes to play that base 4-3, maybe a little bit of that cover 2 shell that you'll be very reminiscent of Lovie Smith, and he loves rushing 4. Well, whether you want to call it desperation or whether you want to call it maybe just some of the talent gaps that they still are trying to grow on the defensive line, Matt Eberflus has had to blitz a little bit more last season than I think he would probably maybe personally, privately want to tell you that he would like to do. But when you have players like Kyler Gordon or even a Jaquan Brisker that can come down and sit down in the box like that, I mean, these guys can all of a sudden now be projectile missiles, as you mentioned, as we saw against the Bengals. And what a luxury to have a guy like Kyler Gordon playing nickel to come in and kind of play that a little bit of that Swiss Army knife that you're talking about. And those stats reflect, obviously, that improvement. My X factor, I'm also going to stay in the secondary. I was going to go Tyreek Stevenson. And the reason why I was going to go Tyreek Stevenson was because, again, he's not going to make or break this season. But if you're telling me this was a guy that first half of last year, Brendan, you saw, man, he was getting picked on a lot, right? He was the guy that, look, we're not throwing to Jalen Johnson. Let's pepper the rookie with some passes here. And that first half of the year, I do feel like he got his head kicked in at times. You know, I mean, I think it was really tough, and it had me triggered, Brendan, to the days of Walt Harris. You know what I'm saying? Of guys that were just, you know what I mean, that we had high hopes for that were getting picked on, and a lot of receptions were happening. But something really interesting happened midway through last year. Tyreek Stevenson, resilient, picked himself up, got better, and by the end of the year, not only was he, you know what I mean, not only was he playing better, but he was picking off passes and picking up interceptions. And I'll always go back to, I did a show with a former cornerback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ike Taylor. Really cool guy. He's now actually in the scouting department. He works for the Pittsburgh Steelers in their scouting development department. And I was asking him about Tyreek Stevenson when he came out of college, and all he did was just say, this dude's a dog. You know what I mean? D-O-G-G style. And I saw that last year in him, that resiliency, where I think a lot of people can kind of maybe take their lumps in rookie year and then We'll see if they get the development. He did it in season. So now if you're telling me he comes into this year, maybe takes one more step forward, and you have him and Jalen Johnson at the corners, pick your poison of who you're going to throw to. And I think that makes this defense all the more dangerous, especially if we have questions on the defensive line. So I'm going with Tyreek Stevenson on this one. Is there any reason why you didn't go with someone on the defensive line, or you know what I mean? Or you think it's going to have to take a village up there?
Well, first off, Tyreek Stevenson is a fantastic answer, and I want to point out how amazing it was that, like you said, he was able to learn from those warts early on. Remember the Mike Evans game against the Bucs, and he just tortured the poor kid? I mean, it was
over and
brutal.
over and over again, yeah.
Yeah, and then at the end of the year, there was one play in particular I want to highlight. It was against the Packers. Early on, Romeo Doubs, I think he ran like kind of a quick corner post. So he fakes out and goes in for the touchdown in the end zone. Easy touchdown. They run that same play in week 18, and Tyreek Stevenson sees it, he knows it, and he breaks it up, and he's celebrating. I'm like, that's the same play from week 1. That's growth. That's development from a young cornerback. And I think, like Gordon, the sky's the limit for this kid. Going to your question though, Gervon Dexter was the other name I was waffling, because they need him to take a huge step in year 2. He's changed his body. He's a lot slimmer. We talked about that earlier in the first segment. So hopefully he can get after the quarterback a lot more effectively and be that disruptor in the middle of the defense. And we know a Matt Eberflus defense, similar to a Lovie Smith defense. You talked about the Tampa 2 style. It is predicated on the front four. And what made Lovie Smith's defense go was Tommy Harris. And I think Gervon Dexter is going to make Matt Eberflus's defense go. But I just couldn't pass up the chance to highlight Gordon, and I know you couldn't pass up the chance to highlight Stevenson, because both of those players can be special, and they can take away certain parts of the field for opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about X factors, we're talking about how do we take a certain thing that we are projecting to have, and what if it goes a step above that? And I think a lot of us have been excited about the secondary all off season, so it makes sense for both of us to go in that direction, because if those two players, Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson, if they take steps forward, all of a sudden now that secondary truly can be called elite, and then we can kind of work it from there. And then obviously that's what you want. You want this Bears defense to be somewhere in that 8 to 12 in the NFL area, and you're hoping that the offense can be somewhere in the middle area, and then all of a sudden you're really kind of cooking with gas. We got to get out of here, so this is it, ladies and gentlemen. It's time. We got to do it. Are you ready to give me your win total prediction? Have you thought about it? Are you ready to reveal it to the masses? Has the smoke plumed out of the thing like the Pope? Or are you ready to say how many wins the Chicago Bears have? Because I think I'm ready to.
Okay, I'm still in the factory, so I'll just quickly go. And things could change, but right now I am going 10-7, and I feel good about the Bears winning at least double-digit games with how the schedule is set up and with how Caleb Williams can grow.
I completely agree with you. I'm going with 10 wins too as well. I've talked myself into it. I was at 8 for a little while, but now when you're starting to look at the schedule, learning about some of the other teams that are out there, I think the Chicago Bears team can win double-digit games. I think the Chicago Bears team can play in the playoffs this year. That's what I'm going with. Sign me up for a WLS. 10 wins for the Chicago Bears. Brendan, we got to get out of here. Brendan Sugrue from the Bears Wire, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to plug it for you. He was just on the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. Wherever you get your podcast, keyword Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. Brendan Sugrue, great guest. Whatever else you want to plug, my friend, throw it out there. Thank you so much for coming on Sports Talk Chicago here on WLS AM 890.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate you having me on. I always love talking ball with you. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Brendan Sugrue. That's Sugrue. Make sure you check out my articles at Bears Wire. I've got my bold predictions coming out in just a couple days. I'm excited for those. And make sure you check out our podcast, the Bear Down Chicago podcast. You can find us. Our next episode is on Wednesday. So take care, my friend, and let's go Bears.
Let's go Bears. If you want the Bears info this season, you got to follow Brendan Sugrue and follow Bears Wire to check out that amazing content. Thank you so much for tuning in to Sports Talk Chicago here on WLS AM 890. I am Joey Christopoulos. We will be back next week, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m., and then after that, back at our regular time, 8 to 9 p.m. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the listen. Be well, be safe. Please be good to each other. We will be back next week. Go out there, enjoy your Saturday, Chicago, and we'll talk again soon.